Good evening and welcome to Suffering in Silence with Tia May on Luv Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Luv Bay family, we're rising out of the ashes together. Our topic on this evening is finding our voices. We have with us Jen Peterkin, our co-host for the evening, and our guest is Patricia McLean. She is an award-winning newspaper reporter and also the founder and president of Finding Our Voices. Luv Bay, on this evening, we're going to start by sharing some information on behalf of the family of Cheryl Tia Long Soldier. Cheryl has been missing since January 3rd, 2022. Cheryl lives in Oglala, Pine Ridge, South Dakota. She's 27 years old. Cheryl is Native American. She's 5'6". She has brown hair and brown eyes. If you have any information, please contact the Pine Ridge, Oglala, Sioux Tribal Police Department. They can be reached at 605-867-5111 or 605-867-5141. To make an anonymous tip, you can text the letters RCPD and your tip to 847-411, or you can call 1-800-CALL-FBI. That's 1-800-225-5324. And again, Cheryl Tia Long Soldier. She has been missing since January 3rd, 2022. She lives in Oglala, Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Cheryl is 27 years old. She is Native American, 5'6". She has brown hair and brown eyes. If you have any information, please contact the Pine Ridge, Oglala Sioux Tribal Police Department, 605-867-5111 or 605-867-5141. Listeners, as usual, if you have any questions or comments for our guest or co-host, you can email sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. If you have resources that you would like to share with us on a national or local level from your country, community, your local organizations, or your faith community, you can also email us at sufferinginsilencedv@gmail.com. Jen, you want to start off tonight with introducing yourself?
Sure. Again, I'm Jen Peterkin. I'm just so thankful to be here. Thank you again, Tia, for having me. I was in an abusive marriage myself, and through going through that experience, became a domestic violence advocate. Currently, I am working on launching a blog and podcast that is called The Human Experience, about telling our stories and how they shape who we are as people. So that's not launched quite yet, but you can follow along on my Instagram right now, which is @GetTheHX.
Thank you. Patricia, please introduce yourself and tell us about how we can reach you at Finding Our Voices.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, and it's really nice to get to know you.
Thank you.
And thank you for everything you're doing to break the silence. We're findingourvoices.net. There's another Finding Our Voices in Colorado that's helps with sexual abuse, but we are findingourvoices.net. We're based in Maine, and we're all about breaking the silence of domestic abuse. We're powered by survivors, and right now we have 41 women, including the governor of Maine, who are on these posters. They're photo portraits. I'm a photographer. I take the pictures. Their names, a quote about the experience they went through. And we have the hotline DV number as well. And these posters have been, we also have bookmarks that are scaled down versions of the posters. Mm-hmm. And they are just going all around Maine, community by community. And they're in downtown business windows, and now we're taking them into high schools. And the bookmarks that also have the women with their names. And actually, in the back of the bookmarks, there's part of their power and control wheel.
Okay.
So everyone's nodding here, but everyone in the country needs to know about this power and control wheel, right? Because it's just, so these women customize it, and just telling their experiences on this in their own handwriting. And so anyway, and those are, police are giving them to women on their domestic violence calls. They're going into boxes of food at food pantries. So that's what it's all about. It's all about spreading awareness, breaking the stigma, getting out information so women know they're not alone. And then we also have sister support in Maine, and we do a number of things. We have online private support group. We have a fund that helps women get out and stay out. And so it's just about breaking the silence. And then when women do say something and come to us, we have sister support for them.
Awesome. And how can we get donations to you?
Well, check out findingourvoices.net.
Okay.
And our website, and you can donate, and you can also, on our website, you can see the 41 women with their faces, and many of them have audio. You can press play, and you can hear their stories.
Okay.
And I myself escaped a 29-year very abusive marriage, and that's what prompted me to start this, and I'm on there as well with my story.
Okay. Thank you so much. So we want to start with giving some additional resources. Luv Bay, first we have Catholics for Family Peace. Their website is www.catholicsforfamilypeace.org. We have Artemis Center, ARTEMIS. Their website is www.artemiscenter.org. Their hotline number is 937-461-4357. Their email address is info@artemiscenter.org. And we also have the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence. Their website is www.mcedv.org. Their phone number is 1-866-834-4357. And for the deaf or hard of hearing, the number is 1-800-437-1220. And again, our topic on tonight is finding our voices. And I would like to actually start by sharing a segment of an article that Patricia wrote. And to me, the article stresses the fact that the seriousness of domestic violence seems to be lost on lawmakers and those who are supposed to be enforcing and upholding the law. So this is from Maine Voices. It is Sentence in Domestic Violence Killing Bodes Poorly for Women's Safety. Again, this was written by Patricia McLean. This is from January 8th, 2022. Maine's first domestic violence killer of 2020 was sentenced in the last days of 2021. And from how that went is going to be even more dangerous to be a woman in this state in 2022. Frederick Allen Jr., 42, of Newport, will likely serve only 7 years in prison for the strangulation killing of his wife, Anilka Allen. The sentence, handed down in Bangor on December 28th, as well as the media coverage, echoed the playbook of domestic abusers. Minimize the abuse and turn it onto the victim. Here are the facts. Anilka Allen, 37, was strangled to death by her husband of 20 years. Her body, found in a bathroom of their house, was described as black and blue, with no injuries, quote, at all, unquote, on Frederick. She was close to graduating from college. Her car was packed for the trip to leave him. Making the travesty of justice in this femicide even worse, it was pushed through by a troika of women. Justice Ann Murray had the power to impose a 30-year prison sentence for his manslaughter conviction. Time served, awaiting trial, and probable time off for good behavior nets 7 years for killing one's wife with one's bare hands. Assistant Attorney General Lisa Brogue, according to news reports, said she is happy the case is resolved and respects the judge's decision. Caitlin Smith, Allen's defense attorney actually stated, according to news reports, "It's a tragedy what happened with Anilka, but it's also a tragedy what happened to Fred." Again, this is the article, "Sentence in Domestic Violence Killing Bodes Poorly for Women's Safety," written by Patricia McLean. So, Patricia, if we want to go to you now, if you want to please speak to your article and tell us about your story and how you came to create Finding Our Voices.
Thank you. And I'll speak to the subsequent article, actually, because that's fresher to me. I wrote another article that just came out a few days ago, and that was about another gentleman who, right? The opposite of what
Right.
this person is. But what I did is I just chronicled it. I went back to the first thing I could see in the paper about him. So when he was like 24, picked up for violent domestic domestic violence against his girlfriend, and they gave him a plea deal. And in Maine we have this kind of plea deal anyway. So he pleads guilty. After a year of good behavior, it's wiped off his record. So the next, about 2 years later, picked up for another domestic violence against another girlfriend, and then he ends up getting 2.5 years, but they suspend all but 2 months. So he just serves 2 months. And then he's on probation for that. And while he's on probation for that, he beats up a third girlfriend. And then he's so for that, he ends up getting a sentence of, it was like, I don't know, it was suspended except for 2 months, another 2-month thing. And then, but then what happened, and I finished the article with that, and then the victim, got in touch with me and said, "Have you, a week, this guy was in jail for a week," and she says, "Have you heard anything, because he's posting on social media?" I'm like, "Well, how could he be posting on social media? She's in jail for 2 months." Come to find out, they had released him after 1 week. They have this program, it's called community, where they can, they're sort of monitored within the community. He spent 1 week in jail for his third domestic violence, putting his hands around her throat, and while on probation for the second one. It's just absolutely insane. But the thing that gets me is there's no outrage.
Right.
We're outraged.
Yeah.
If you talk to the district attorneys, if you talk to the lawyers, if you talk to the judges, no one's outraged about this. They're like, yep. It's like, they just accept it. I can't get over that.
Yeah.
Right. So there's no justice, and there's no account. I mean, it's just, we know that, but only when you open your eyes, then you see it, and you're like, what? How could this be? And I know it's not just in Maine, but I'm focusing in Maine because that's what I know, and that's what I see. And so we just, feel the more people that are aware of this, the more they will clamor for change, and hopefully change will come.
Well, I hope so. I hope the more people, who hear about this, who know about this, and who understand the issue, I hope as we bring awareness to it, that change will come. But as you said, it's not just Maine. I'm in Pennsylvania in the United States, and it seems to me, and Jen, let me know what you think, but it seems to me that it's on the victim's shoulders. It's on the victim's shoulders to cry out, to speak up, to try to gather change, and that makes no sense at all. You are already broken and beaten down physically, mentally, and emotionally, and you're trying to find the will within yourself to just survive, to just make it to another day, and sometimes not even a whole day, to just get from one moment to the next. You're trying to survive, and then you have to take on the whole criminal justice system too. That makes no sense.
The thing that really gets me is they malign victims. The district attorneys malign victims because they always say, well, we can't prosecute because the victim doesn't cooperate. Then the victim cooperates and nothing happens.
Yeah.
And so it's like what happened with me. My ex almost killed me, and they gave him this, again, one of these plea deals. And I did think at the time that it was because, he had money and he had a good lawyer. And then I was kicking myself because I was thinking, what could I have done? Like I failed. Like I should have been more vocal. I should have been, insisting that, on this, on that, and the other thing. And I was beating myself up over it because there was nothing that happened to him over this. And then but then I came to find out that it's not because he has money. It's not because of this or the other thing. It's just that's the way it happens.
Yeah.
But usually women go through this private hell. And then, as you said, it just takes a lot of time to try to just stand up again. And you don't understand that this is happening everywhere. So it's just like this whole thing that's going on that's corrupt to the core. And it's working for everybody. It's working for the lawyers. They're making money hand over fist because they're representing the perpetrators and the victims.
Yeah.
And the perpetrators, of course, drag you into court because that's another form of abuse, right? They won't let you go and they just keep, bringing you in court. And it's working for the, district attorneys because to them a plea deal is a win. The judges, keep getting respect. And the perpetrators, of course, nothing happens to them and they just keep getting girlfriend after girlfriend. So it works for everybody but the victim. And the victim, they're taking advantage of it. The system's taking advantage of it because they know how traumatized the victims are and that, it's really hard to speak up, especially when you've been beaten down by the people that are supposed to be helping you.
It is. Jen, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100%. There is no other, violent crime outside of domestic violence and sexual assault where the burden of proof lies so heavily on the victim. It's just, it's such a sin that this continues to be the case and happen. And, talking about trauma, going through something like that is the most traumatic thing you can go through. But then all of the processes after are re-traumatizing. So you're not only re-experiencing your own trauma, which is trauma, but then you have trauma on top of that from all of the other people that are digging into your story. And so then we have the narrative that, well, we need to be absolutely sure that these people, these women, because it's mostly women, aren't lying. And so in order to do that, we need to just dig and dig and dig until we know that without a shadow of a doubt that these women aren't lying. And I want to know who in their right mind would go through all of this for a lie. No one. The answer is no one. So, I'm just so sick and tired of that entire narrative.
Yeah.
All those narratives are abusive. And I remember the court process. Just, I was going through trying to get divorced from this person at the same time that the, criminal trial was going to be happening. And I had a misogynist lawyer and who wouldn't listen to me. Like, he didn't care what I said. He just went and did whatever he wanted and was, just going through my money like crazy. Like, I didn't think I'd have anything left by the end of it. And I remember thinking, like, I was more traumatized by what he was doing to me than what my ex had done to me. I remember feeling that. Like, I am, because I was a total wreck, and I was thinking, this is what this trauma is coming from my own lawyer that I'm paying like how much money an hour. But it's true because it just to come from such an unexpected place. Like, they're supposed to be your advocate, and then the victim witness advocate. How dare they call them victim witness advocate? They're district attorney advocate. They're not representing the victim. So you feel that they're your friend and they're on your side. And like mine that was assigned to me, I check in with her all the time. Like, how's it going for the trial? Because she said there was going to be a trial because he wasn't going to plead guilty. And she kept saying to me, well, are you going to testify? And I said, yes. And she said, because if you don't, that we won't be able to, it will really be hard to prosecute. And it was almost like she was wanting me to say I wasn't going to. And I kept assuring her that I was going to. And then in the end, she just called me and said, we're just giving him this plea deal, which, what? Like, and we don't know anything, right? Because I've never been in court before. I've never had a lawyer before. Right. I don't know anything. I don't know how anything works. But Jen, it sounds like did your case go to court?
It did not. I have been in the advocacy sphere for several years now, but my case personally did not. It could not have, because the law is so far behind what actually domestic violence is. because God forbid I not have a black eye, and
Right.
profess that I've been a victim of domestic violence. So, I mean, the reality is that we live in a patriarchal society. So men are of higher value than women. And so when we go through the court systems, they want to say, well, it's easier to push down this woman than to ruin a man's life.
Oh yeah, and that's the other thing they do all the time when they're trying to get these dastardly plea deals through, and they're telling the victim to come on board with it. And they say things like, well, you know, if he's prosecuted, then he won't be able to have a job. You know, if he's found guilty, and then it's gonna impede like how much money he can give you for child support. And there's women who agree to that, and the guy doesn't pay anyway.
Right.
But it's always an excuse, you know. And that's the other thing is we have got to get coercive control to be a crime in every state in this country, because it's not just physical abuse. It doesn't matter. Like abuse is abuse, and men. You know, they can tear you down and break you and make you a shell of yourself and rob you of your free will, your liberty, and not even lay a hand, you know, not harm you physically. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much to domestic violence that when you're in this world, you understand. But like you said before, people outside of it are really not in touch with all that domestic violence encompasses. And you were talking about the power and control wheel. I remember being in therapy because I thought I was the problem while I was married. I was in therapy by myself, and I was like, listen, I don't know what to do. Nothing I do is working. I'm really unhappy. He's always upset. What's happening? And she pulled out the power and control wheel, and she said, does any of this resonate with you? And I said, I think there were 8 of them. I said, all but 2. So that's how I found out that I was in an abusive relationship. You know, it's not like it wasn't clear.
Wouldn't it be amazing to have these power and control wheels, like big posters in every high school in the country, and it to be like, you know, on bags and magnets and everything? Like if everybody knew about the power and control wheel, that would save so much trouble. Like we could recognize it, we could avoid it, you know, we could put a name to it, and it would be very helpful. It's something that everyone needs to know.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so, well, we're trying, at least on our end, to get to raise awareness, because it's an issue that's real. It's an issue that's not going away. It's an issue that affects everyone, whether you're actually a victim or a survivor or not. This affects us all. And I was explaining to someone the process of getting a protection from abuse order. At least where I am, you have to go to court, you have to fill out paperwork, and you sit in this room. That paperwork, after you sit a couple hours waiting for that paperwork goes upstairs to a judge who reads your paperwork while that judge is reading other paperwork. And they decide.
Why didn't she come and sit with you? Right. Why didn't she come and sit with you and talk to you?
Yep.
And also
they're upstairs in a room. They're upstairs in a room listening to all these other cases. So you're lumped in with everything else. And then they read your paperwork. They're reading to decide if they're going to hear your complaint. Not grant the PFA order, but if they're going to hear you. If they want to hear you, then you go upstairs to the courtroom. Then they hear you. Then they decide if they're going to grant it or not. And then it's the responsibility of the victim to have that paperwork served to the perpetrator, because you got to come back.
I know. I couldn't believe it. Well, a few other things in there is you walk up to the clerk's window in Maine, they hand you this thing. Most of them would have no idea what this is. It's the first time they're just gathering up their courage. It takes such a huge step to do this.
Right.
There's no explanation. And they can't give advice. So they just hand it to you. And the thing is, God forbid you filled it out wrong, because there's this woman who was in our project. She filled it out the best she could. And then when it was her time for the court case, she stood up there and she just told the judge everything, including the fact that this guy had raped her in a hot tub with his friends in the hot tub. And after she'd had, like, I think it was like some kind of procedure, like with her inside, it was like a very sensitive procedure. He raped her right after that operation, and she was telling the judge everything, and the judge said, "This is not admissible because you did not write it in the paperwork." No one told her that. So you have to know that kind of thing, and then the other thing someone pointed out about protection from abuse orders that I never really realized this, but to get a protection from abuse order, you could tell a judge these horrible things, these crimes, and the judge can grant you the protection from abuse order. But why isn't it a crime? Like, if you're telling about these crimes that were done, why is this guy not arrested?
Right.
Why does it not come into the criminal court? So on one hand, it might not even be a good thing to have these things because it diverts it, and it's not a crime. These guys need to be charged as the criminals they are.
Yeah, that and the fact that it's, at the end of the day, it's a piece of paper.
Exactly.
It's a piece of paper.
Exactly. And the thing is, if you violate it, they're not going to do anything.
Right.
It's like I don't know what it's like there, but in Maine, these guys violate it over and over and over again, and the women call the police, and the police make it sound like they're, just trying to cause trouble, and they don't do anything about it. It's just not working.
Yeah. So victims are victimized over and over again as you're going through the process. You're trying to get the help that you need, and as you said, no one just automatically knows what to do. Like, you're just in the courtroom one day, you're in a police station one day, you have officers standing in front of you, and you're still dealing with the shock of whatever it is happened. The shock of whatever it is that you're dealing with. It's really hard to function, to get your thoughts together, to start writing information down on paper and then telling your story. Another, I think, a harrowing thing is repeatedly telling the story. You have to tell it. You tell it to the officers, and then you tell it to, if you're with the doctor, then you're telling it to lawyers, and you're telling it to counselors. You're telling the same story to all of these people in the same circle. It's like, do you share information? It's like, because you're victimized all over again, after you have to keep repeating this.
Well, what I found interesting about that whole process is, yes, on one hand, you're telling your story because, like, I had to tell it to my lawyer, and I had to tell it for the protection from abuse order, I had to tell it to the police. But I never got to tell it to the judge. And all I wanted to do was I wanted my day in court. I wanted to speak to a judge in an open court, and I wanted to lay out what this individual had done to me. And I never got a chance to because there were always agreements. And that's the way it is. They want to avoid bringing you in front of the judge because it costs money or it takes time. So the two lawyers get together and they always forge agreements. And despite all my efforts, I never got a chance to speak in open court about what this person did to me. And once again, it's that whole patronizing thing of, well, we'll save you the trouble of, that it's traumatizing to be on the stand or anything. I wanted to do it, but no one let me do it. So
yeah.
Silenced. I was silenced. I was silenced.
Right. So after going through everything you went through and after making the decisions to come forward, that's its own kind of trauma. But I think it's important to acknowledge that, the question that I don't know why it's still asked, but it is, of why do you stay? This is right here, all of this, because making the decision, you're not just making one decision to leave. You have to make it over and over again because there are so many steps and so many processes to go through. It is not just walking out the door.
Right.
And they're not going to let you go that easily. And also, once you do leave, he's going to be angrier than ever, and nothing's going to happen to him for what he did to you. And then if there's children involved, oh my God, I'm just. On one hand, I'm sorry that I didn't leave when the kids were little because of with the home they grew up in. But the more I hear from women about what they're going through now with kids and the abuse of exes, it just scares me to think of what it would have been like, because the trauma that's inflicted when you have children, and the guy is now out to punish you. He's out to punish you for leaving. Yeah, and he knows that the way to get to you, they know you,
through
right?
the children. Yeah,
most through the children. And that's what they'll do. And the courts allow it because there's the family court and the criminal court are completely separate. These guys are being brought in shackles into family court because of beating up the woman, and then they're talking about visitation and custody when he's standing there in shackles.
Right.
It's insane.
Because visitation, custody, has nothing to do with the criminal part. It has nothing to do with child support. Everything is separate. So you find yourself going to all these different courts. You're dealing with the same person, but you're going to all these different courtrooms to deal with it on all these different levels. It's a travesty.
And it's all the rights are for the perpetrator. It's all the consideration, and then all the services. You know, the therapy and the pro bono lawyer, and he I don't know if you have something called. We have something called batter's intervention in Maine. Do you have that kind of thing there?
Yes, we do.
I mean, really? Do you think that helps you guys?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think if batterer's intervention, oh my goodness. First of all, if you're being forced to go into a program that you don't want to go into, I mean, that you might as well just scrap it right then and there. But then to me, it just goes back to the point of, and I think Jen was saying earlier, you need to define and understand what domestic violence is, because it has nothing to do with anger. And so many different people or individuals are quick to say he just needs anger management. Send him to this class, send him to this course and deal with his anger. That is not what domestic violence is about. It has nothing to do with anger. And so, okay, you have a batterers program, then what? That he's forced to go to. He didn't voluntarily say, I have an issue, I have a problem, I want to work on it.
No, they never think they did anything wrong. And also, what they do is they learn the language, and they're just totally manipulative. And like this guy that I'm talking about, like earlier in the program, about how he ended up getting a week in jail for those three, beating up three different women. He went through batter's intervention twice, and he got a sterling report card. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it's his batter's intervention counselor that wrote a letter to the judge saying how, he's turned into a fine young man. He's understanding his actions and repercussions of actions. They bought it. I mean, it
yeah. I mean, so much of domestic violence revolves around narcissism. And so, what we fail as a society to understand is that they know what to say. Yeah. They know what the right thing to say is, what the right thing to do is. They are most likely the people in your community that you most respect. True. So we have this idea or this vision in our heads of what an abuser looks like, and he's not who that abuser actually is. They're charismatic. They usually have a lot of acquaintances and shallow friendships. They are easy to be around. And that's what makes this so insidious, and that's what makes it them so good at it. So yeah, they could go through a program like that all day. That's not going to help anybody, right? Because all they're doing is checking a box. They know how to do that, and they know what to say to us, and that's how they lured us in, right? How do you think we got lured in with these guys? If we'd seen, what we saw later, we certainly wouldn't have stepped up to be in that relationship, right? But yeah, they're charming, and they put on a completely false front, and they're highly manipulative. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Luv Bay, we want to welcome you again to Suffering in Silence with Tia May on Luv Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here every Friday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern, with the replay on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Luv Bay, we're rising out of the ashes together. I want to share again the information on Cheryl Tia Long Soldier. She has been missing since January 3rd, 2022. Cheryl lives in Oglala, Pine Ridge, South Dakota. She is 27 years old. Cheryl is Native American. She is 5'6". She has brown hair and brown eyes. If you have any information, please contact the Pine Ridge, Oglala Sioux Tribal Police Department, 605-867-5111 or 605-867-5141. To make an anonymous tip, you can text the letters RCPD and your tip to 847-411, or you can call 1-800-225-5000. 5324. And our prayers are going out to the family and friends and to Cheryl Tia Long Soldier. A couple of more resources that we have to share. From Adams County, you can reach out to Pike County Partnership Against Domestic Violence. Their number is 740-947-1611. Auglaize County, you can reach out to Crisis Center, Auglaize County. Their number is 419-738-5511. In Brown County, you can reach out to Women's Crisis Center in Northern Kentucky. Their number is 800-928-3335. Jen, I'll give you the next question or comment.
Sure. Yeah, so Patricia, I just really love your, did a little Google search. So I read a couple of the things that you commented on, and I read the article that you had done with the Irish Times, and I just really, really love how you called out the fact that your abuser was allowed to comment on the abuse and like it didn't even happen, and he was allowed to say, and he got press for basically saying that you're crazy, this isn't the story, whatever. So talking about how the abuser gets to have that platform and they're automatically believed, what's your experience with that?
Well, before I'll go to my own experience, the article that Tia referenced that I wrote about, one of the most egregious things about this, the guy that got 7 years for strangling his wife, was that all the quotes in the articles that I read were from his relatives saying that she was violent and that, they defamed this woman who was dead, who was the victim of domestic violence, making it sound like this guy. And then they even quoted him saying, he did everything he could, and he loved her with all his heart. I mean, they were sympathetic to him. So anyway, for my case, I guess we all have our own, private hell, right? Like specific circumstances, and it's difficult for everybody. And what made mine more difficult, I think, is that he is a celebrity of sorts. And so every time he would say something, the papers would pick it up, and it would be in all the newspapers. I mean, as far as I can see, it went around the world sometimes. And it was just self-serving lies. Like he would say that we're trying, we're working on getting back together again. And but then, of course, he would insinuate that I was crazy, and then he even did that to my daughter, because my daughter did an interview with Rolling Stone magazine telling about the abuse inflicted upon her growing up, and they gave him time to quote and disparage her, and he was actually disparaging her, and they quoted that. And then the New York Times did a story on me on the first story they did on my project. Then they got quotes from him, and he said, she's a woman scorned, and they quoted that. Like it was just giving a platform for more punches to my head, every time. And I don't understand that. I just don't. And I think it's irresponsible.
Yeah. It's extremely irresponsible because they're not on the same level. I mean,
it's not a he said, she said. It's not a he said, she said at all. This guy's convicted of domestic abuse. He pled guilty to domestic abuse. I'm the victim of domestic abuse. How on earth do you try to, he said this, she said this, and then they portray it like a he said, she said situation.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So, the guy gets his time to stand up for himself, or because the root cause here, right, is that women aren't to be trusted. We're to be wary and cautious of what women say because they're liars and manipulators. And so when a woman comes forward with her story, and unfortunately you had to live that in a very public light sometimes. But just in general, when a woman comes forward with their story, the narrative is, well, let's see what he has to say, because if he says you're lying, then we're probably going to believe that maybe you're not telling us the whole truth, and maybe you're exaggerating a little bit, because, women are emotional. And so I just think it's really disgusting, and as you said, irresponsible, that any airtime is given to that at all. That we get to step in and say, no, he doesn't get to comment on his view of the situation. He did the wrong thing.
Right.
He was in the wrong.
Like if a man, punches a woman on the street or, robs a bank, do they go to the bank robber? And when they're doing a story about the bank robbery, and do they get quotes from the bank robber? Or the
Exactly.
It's insane.
Exactly.
Right. So, Patricia, when I began to do research to prepare for you coming on to the program as a guest, that's when I became familiar with your personal story. So I want to ask, and Jen, I'll ask you too as well. What do you think about musicians being barred or canceled, their music not being played anymore, or really no matter what business the perpetrator may be a part of? What do you think of perpetrators not being allowed to continue or function in their business or leadership positions as they have hurt individuals? They've caused violence towards a man or a woman or a child, but the public is still buying their products and they're still financially supporting them. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I got that. But Jen, let's hear you first. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, and it's so funny because I have to even catch myself because of the society that we're brought up in. Because my first thought is, well, let's make an excuse, right? But no, there are consequences for our actions. Yes. We see that in every other sphere of life. Every other action you take, negative action has a consequence. So that's totally fair as a consequence. Now, do I judge people who go out and listen to music from abusers or purchase products from known abusers? Maybe a little bit, but on some level, I do understand that you can't get rid of everything. But I think that there's more to it than that, and there's more nuance than that. And my biggest issue is that in our society, we have such a big celebrity worship culture. And so you can't have both and, right? In our culture, this person, I idolize them. They can't do anything wrong. I have to love them and love them unconditionally. But both can be true, where you can like somebody's product and like what they have done or produced, but also know and be willing and open to talk about the fact that they have perpetrated these terrible crimes. And I think a lot of what needs to happen too is we need to look at how the accused responds to these accusations, right? If they immediately come up as defensive and they don't want to admit anything and, the woman is crazy or whatever it may be, well, then you know what? Nothing is changing in that scenario. If somebody comes forward and apologizes or tries to make amends in some way, it doesn't make it okay what happened. But that's a nuance there that I can work with, right? So I think ultimately when we have a society that really values classes of people, that becomes such a huge problem because there's this worship of celebrities, people with money. They are set on a pedestal and we're allowed to idolize them. And everybody just needs to come down off of those. No one belongs on them.
Well, speaking of people who don't belong on them, so after um, my ex was, charged and everything, I wrote. He had been touring with Judy Collins at the time, like for the year before the arrest, and after the arrest, I wrote a letter to Judy Collins, and I told her what had been going on. I told her more than was publicly revealed. The history of the 29 years of the sexual, physical, emotional, every kind of abuse. Mm-hmm. And she continued to tour with him. Mm-hmm. She's an icon, right, of woman empowerment. And then you have someone like Dolly Parton. I love Dolly Parton. She had him on her show. And this is after she knew, they shared the same publicist. She knew about his charges, his guilty pleas. That's wrong. Because by doing that, you're letting everybody know. And women look up to these people, these two women. And you're letting everyone know it's okay. It doesn't matter. And I do feel like, if there's a child molester who's, running a hot dog stand in your neighborhood, like, I'm not going to buy hot dogs from him. If we know that this guy, if there's an arson, whoever it is, and they're, they have a store, I'm going to decide to shop somewhere else. And all you're doing is and when it comes to celebrities, I mean, I just feel that, and I just would think that there's a lot of musicians out there. Why don't you support the ones who aren't, beating up their wives, basically, and beating up women, and are misogynists and are abusing their daughters.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. My abuser is a reverend, and in so many people's eyes, he could do no wrong for no other reason than he's a reverend. So it didn't matter what I said. It didn't matter what I went through. He's always admitted to being abusive. So I never had to fight against his word because he always admitted it. But because he's a reverend, he was given a pass. There are pastors, other ministers that continue to work with him, that work with him now on various projects.
That's hurtful.
But it doesn't.
That's personally hurtful to you, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. It's a slap in the face. It really is. And some of those individuals were my friends, but there was no consequence. And I believe there needs to be a consequence. There does need to be a consequence. There are men and women who are still holding political positions. We have governors, mayors, judges, they're lawyers, bishops, all types of clergy, police officers. They're still going on and getting financial stability and notoriety after they've hurt people. But there does need to be consequences, be it financial or physical. And by physical, I mean going to jail, not retaliation. So don't do that. But there needs to be consequences. There have to be, I believe, ramifications for what a person does. And as Jen was saying earlier, I believe it's completely different if they're standing up and they're taking accountability for what they've done. If they're taking responsibility and they're trying to make some changes, they're trying to right the wrongs. If they have a change of attitude and their actions prove that, I get that. I can work with that too. But if you're adamant, I did not violate this man, I did not violate this woman, I did not violate this child, and there's proof that you have done so, you shouldn't be able to benefit financially from a music career or writing or politics or whatever it is, while the victim continues to suffer as you enjoy success. There needs to be consequences.
How did you feel about the congregants continuing to go to him?
I was devastated.
That was very hurtful also.
I was devastated. For me, on one level, it was one thing when no one knew anything, but it was completely different when I broke my silence and when I started reaching out for help. When I started trying to get help and I was met with that rejection, that absolutely hurt. It absolutely hurt. People who I thought, were friends, were there with me, would support me. When I opened up, I saw that, those weren't friendships. And it really didn't matter. You know, he had Reverend in front of his name, so he just got to go on like nothing happened. But that was devastating to me. I felt worthless. I felt like my word doesn't matter. I felt like my life doesn't matter. I felt like you can see the effects of what's going on, what I'm going through, and I don't matter as a person simply because he has Reverend in front of his name. And that's not okay. It's not.
Is he a charismatic person?
I don't think so, but I guess some others might. But
Someone thought so.
Somebody thought something, but you know, and I feel like, you know, your personality shouldn't matter. If people think you're the life of the party, if they think you're the cool head, if they think whatever, it doesn't matter because it's a facade. It's not real.
And you outed it. You broke your silence.
Yeah.
And to have it not matter, it's like to have it not matter, to come out publicly with something that is so private and difficult, and to have it not matter, that's just really devastating.
That's so another thing that victims deal with. That's another fight we have with trying to get victims to tell their story, to open up, because unfortunately some are met, you know, with that resistance. You know, he couldn't be, because he's so good at this. He's so good at this sport, so he couldn't be doing this to you. He's so good at this job. He couldn't be doing this to you. And it's like people build up, you know, the persona they have of that person in their mind. And that persona, you know, takes more precedence than your life and your well-being. You know, that is devastating.
Or it's money. You know, with my, it's financial. Like, you know, the fact that his people that in his band stayed with him. You know, I was on the tour with them a lot. Like, you think they'd be disgusted and they'd quit the band? No. You know, the promoters, his PR people, like, they should have walked away from him, but they didn't, because there's money to be made, and they're still making money from it.
Yeah, there's money to be made, and this is what we do. Like, this is who we are as a society. We're allowed to take this stance, because if we don't, if somebody actually, not in the situation, like not the victim themselves, but if someone close to him actually steps back and says, you know what, yeah, I can't be a part of this anymore, you're in it now. You now know, and you have a responsibility to it. And so for so many things, it's so easy to just say, well, I'm just going to kind of stay quiet, stay in my space. We're a very individualistic society. I'm going to stay in my space, and that's going to be that. Because if I take any action here, I have to now say that I acknowledge that this is true and it's happening, and I have a responsibility as a member of this society to do something to change it. And nobody wants to do that.
Yeah. So.
Did your neighbors end up knowing when you left? Were you public about what he had done to you?
So, he was military, and we weren't living on a base or anything, but I was very isolated. So we didn't have, I was hours away from family and friends, and we didn't have really any friends down there except for his friends. So when I left, I got to come back. You know, in some ways it was nice, because I got to come back to a place where he didn't live. I wasn't going to run into him at the grocery store. But it was like that part of my life didn't even happen, because it was just a cold cutoff. So yeah, I had people up in my life that struggled with what I was going through. I had a lot of support. I have to say, I had a lot of friends and family that supported me, but I had people that were like, you know, I'm just going to step back and quietly fade away here, because I don't want to be involved.
Well, ladies, we're just under the hour. So, Patricia, I want to give you the last words. I thank you again so much for being here with us, for sharing your story, and for sharing with us about your foundation. But I want to give you the last few minutes.
Thank you very much. Findingourvoices.net. if you're going through it, you're not alone. And if you're not going through it, don't think that this does not affect you, because there is somebody that you love who has either gone through it or going through it now, and you just don't know. And if you do know of someone who is going through it and wondering what to do about it, I just go around and around with this, but don't you all agree that I think the best thing you could do is just let the person know how much you love them, how much you value them.
Yes.
Reality checks now and then, this isn't right, you shouldn't be doing this, this is how you should be treated. But just that, don't judge, it's complicated. It's complicated, and if they know that you're there for them, then when they are ready, they can reach out. And even if they reach out and then they end up going back, that's okay too. You still stay there with them. It's unless you're in it, it's hard to understand the trap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Jen, you got a few final words?
I just want to say thank you to Patricia. It was such an honor to talk to you. It was so much fun.
Well, we're sisters, We're sisters.
Yeah.
And it's really great to be here tonight together.
Absolutely. And I want to echo your call to, just really loving the people in your life. And if you see this, somebody going through this, absolutely just be that presence in their life that doesn't waver, doesn't get tired of them not making the right decision or the decision you think you would make, because until you're in it, you don't know.
Well, thank you, ladies, again. Jennifer Peterkin, my co-host, and our guest on this evening, Patricia McLean, again, award-winning newspaper writer and founder and president of Finding Our Voices. Luv Bay, if you want to catch up on some previous episodes from the program, you can visit our YouTube channel, Suffering in Silence DV. We thank you again for joining Suffering in Silence with Tia May on Luv Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. We're here every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And remember, Luv Bay, we're rising out of the ashes together. Good evening.